Hello, everybody, and welcome to Affected by Altitude, the rare live stream version. We are live on your computers, cell phones, and other electronical type devices that display video on youtube.com. Affected by Altitude, the Colorado Rockies show on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, proud part of Fans First Sports Network. It's me, Evan Lang, with Skylar Timmons, and we're here to discuss the 2023 Major League Baseball trade deadline.
Woo! Do you think anybody's watching on their Samsung smart refrigerator?
I'm sure there's at least one person. I was looking at our metrics the other day, and I'm sure it's probably from like VPNs and stuff like that, but it was like, here's where all your viewers are from. Oh, you have like 10 viewers in Germany and a couple in the United Kingdom and one in Thailand and one in New Zealand. And I'm like, okay.
There we go. It works. I also put up a little pennant above me to try and combat the glare that comes off my closet door.
See, I have to find a way to combat the glare that comes off my just blindingly white face. In that, sure, I just spent 2 days over the weekend in the sun the entire day, and yet I gained no color whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it works.
But for those of you who are here now, for those of us who are joining us, we're just going to do a little bit of live show here. We are talking about the Colorado Rockies at the trade deadline. The deadline officially passed about 1 hour ago, 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and the Rockies were actually, active participants at the deadline, something that, as we talked about on the show that went up yesterday morning, we really haven't seen them do in quite some time, probably not since 2015 with the Troy Tulowitzki trade.
Yeah, it's a little bit more busy than usual, which is good to see. And while not as high of a caliber of moves this year as Troy Tulowitzki or something like that, pretty simple, easy, simple moves that were smart and needed to be made for them old Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's weird. And it's funny that it's weird because I said that my personal over for where I would be happy with the Rockies is if they traded 3 players, and they did that and more, which is honestly surprised me because he wasn't expecting it, because you think about what this team has done the last couple of years at the deadline, and that's either the bare minimum or nothing at all. And so we get to today, and we had already made several trades pre-deadline, as it were, and then we rounded it out with a 4th player. So the Rockies this season and going into last offseason being actually kind of active on the trade market is not something we're really used to in this current iteration of the Colorado Rockies. It was sort of the MO for a lot of the late tenure of general manager Jeff Bridich. And, for the first year of Bill Schmidt, we expected more of the same, because that's sort of what happened, especially with, when we held on to Trevor Story and John Gray, when everyone was screaming, no, you need to trade them because they're not coming back. And John Gray, we thought there was maybe a little bit of hope that he'd come back, but we all knew that Trevor Story was not coming back. And granted, by giving him the qualifying offer of $18 million, and him not accepting it, we get the draft pick that brings us Sterling Thompson. Sterling Thompson's been great currently in the Rockies minor league system. So, in the end, it kind of worked out. But, Skylar, how does this sort of color your perception of general manager Bill Schmidt now?
The problem thing with it is we still have to see results, and we'll recap all these trades that have happened here thus far. Some we already know about and talked about beforehand, but it's mostly, hey, we still need to see some results of these, and a lot of the guys they've gotten back, they've traded for, it's going to be a while, maybe a couple years before we see anything out of them. Whereas the immediate help of him building the big league roster at the moment hasn't been great, but it's a good step in the right direction to see them kind of finally shift gears and be like, yeah, we're gonna make some moves at this time. We're gonna get rid of some of these guys that they're not going to be here. And it's a twofold thing of, well, is this just sort of a reactionary, and this wasn't their plan at all, and they were expecting to be in the midst of a playoff race at the moment, and so this kind of forced their hand, the injuries and everything, it kind of forced their hand, like, yeah, we got to punt on things. But for the most part, overall, it's a good step in the right direction of maybe Dick Monfort's not hanging over everybody like, hey, man, you got to hold on to these people. You got to think of the money. Think of these people, their family. But instead, it's like, no, we're in a terrible spot right now, and we got to ship off some of these homies and bring in some new guys for the future. Because, Evan, the Rockies need pitching.
And they got pitching. Like, they very much targeted pitching at this deadline. In terms of trades where players were involved, they made 4 total trades, resulting in 6 new pitching prospects coming onto the team. They also made, and we'll talk about a little bit later, a small waiver trade with the Los Angeles Dodgers to bring in Justin Bruihl, another younger pitcher who's only 26 years old. The Rockies recognized that they needed pitching. They needed to fill out their pitching depth in the minor leagues, and that's what they did. They didn't target any position players. They just went straight for the pitching. And we have, the one trade that they made for a position player so far this season was when we brought in Nolan Jones in the Juan Brito trade back last winter. And, Bill Schmidt said that the focus had to be on pitching, and that is what they indeed focused on. So they brought in now a bunch of different pitchers, 6 total, 2 of which were not ranked with their previous organization, but the other 4 were, which is really, really interesting to see, because it doesn't mean that we are just getting, scrap parts or whatever is necessarily available. It's a mix of guys the Rockies have scouted and thought they were high on, and guys whom their previous organizations were high on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we might as well just run down the list at this point of what went down, since that's what this whole show is about. So back in June, we're going back. We've already talked about this before, but just catching up with everything because it kind of fits in trade deadline season. Mike Moustakas, who we signed for a league minimum. Reds are paying most of his contract. Send him over to the Los Angeles Angels. You'll notice a theme here between the 2 teams that the Rockies traded with this year for Connor Van Scoyoc. He was minor league pitcher, and so far, so good with old Connor Van Scoyoc. Hasn't been too shabby. He's in Double-A now. Had a rough Double-A outing, but so far in what little we've seen of him in a Rockies organization, Connor Van Scoyoc looking like he's a good depth piece to have. Still kind of young, moving up.
Van Scoyoc pitched really, really solidly for High A Spokane, and they decided to move him up because he was, expected to be at Double-A at some point this year, and they made that move. But with High A Spokane, ERA of 3.33 over 4 starts, struck out 22 and walked just 5, and only gave up 1 home run. That's super solid. And, he did struggle in his first outing as a Hartford Yard Goat, but that jump from High A to Double-A is one of the hardest jumps in minor league baseball in terms of the level of competition and difficulty there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we'll get more time with him on that. But we've gone in depth about him quite a bit in the past. But a good solid piece for Mike Moustakas, of all people, who's now pretty much the starting third baseman for the Angels, of all places, and not doing too shabby for him. So happy for Moose there. And then we wait until, most recently, just like last week or so, of Pierce Johnson, who was our closer, gets traded over to the Atlanta Braves for Victor Vodnik. Victor Vodnik and Tanner Gordon. That's his name, right?
Yes.
I'm just going to continue to forget his name. Victor Vodnik, Tanner Gordon, pretty decent prospects in the Braves system. Surprising we got that for Pierce Johnson, but you get a top 10 guy, another top 30 guy in Victor Vodnik and Tanner Gordon, both of which not too shabby so far. They're in the lower levels of the minor league system. And we just recently even talked about them on this week's episode of Affected by Altitude that dropped Monday.
Yeah, you can get a little bit more information on the Pierce Johnson trade, either in the solo episode that Skylar did late last week when the trade actually went down, and then our episode that went up yesterday or Monday this week. So not a whole lot more to say on that other than, Pierce Johnson had good stuff, just stuff that isn't really a good fit for this organization and pitching at altitude. And in return for his services, we got 2 top 30 prospects from the Braves in Vodnik and Gordon. Vodnik currently sits at number 22 after some of the other trades. I believe he was sitting at as high as like 19 or 18 before some of these other trades came through. And then Tanner Gordon is currently unranked in our system. That doesn't mean that he's not a good prospect. However, it just means that, our system is actually pretty deep right now, all things considered, that he's just not a top 30 on there. So Pierce Johnson in exchange for 2 guys who are both going to start in AA Hartford, in Vodnik and Gordon. Vodnik being a reliever and Gordon being a starter.
Yeah, not too shabby. All right, now we get into the stuff we haven't talked about yet, Evan, because the Rockies like to do stuff right after we record episodes. It's a running gag, especially now that we're not recording on Sundays usually now. So they decide to do stuff when we don't record. But another trade with the Angels, and this was probably the big one. This is the big one of the whole trade deadline, is sending CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk, plus a little $2 million in cheddar cheese, over to the Angels for Jake Madden and Mason Albright, a couple of minor league pitcher prospects. Again, kind of same thing with Pierce Johnson. One was a top 10. The other one's like in the top 30 in Jake Madden and Mason Albright. But this was a huge trade. Seemed really surprising that they got packaged together and sent over to the Angels late after, what was it, on Sunday? Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, it was
Sunday.
Was it Sunday night? Yeah, it was Sunday night. And it really was a surprise but it makes sense. We both said that the Angels made sense as a destination for both Grichuk and Cron. And it really worked out, especially because they've had a lot of injuries recently. I believe Jared Walsh, who took a pitch to the face and has some facial fractures.
Taylor Ward.
Jared Walsh is the one that the Angels traded to the Phillies.
He got DFA'd and now he's in the minors.
Interesting. I did not know that. So Taylor Ward gets hit in the face with a pitch. And now all of a sudden they have a pressing need for a first baseman.
Yeah.
And CJ Cron just happens to fit that build. Combine that with Randall Grichuk, because you always need good outfield help and a good hitter like Grichuk. And I really like this trade. We've seen a lot on social media of the tired old, the Rockies are trading away all their best players. But it's so important to recognize, and I had to talk with multiple people about this today, how important it is to realize that this is exactly what the Rockies needed to do. You have 2 guys on expiring contracts. They will likely not be back next year, and it's very unlikely that they'd be given the QO, because if you give them that QO, they're probably going to take it because it would represent some of the most money they've made in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
In exchange, you get prospects, pitching prospects, that while they're not an immediate value, they are a future value to the team. And these are good prospects too. We'll talk about them in a second. And then in addition, I saw some people who were upset that the Rockies sent, the cash considerations, the $2 million to the Angels, because I know that was a sore spot for the Nolan Arenado trade. To that I say, one, at least we're not the New York Mets, who are paying it's something like $150 million of players that are no longer on their payroll. And it's higher than, I have to remember what that tweet said. It's higher than the payroll of 13 different major league organizations that they are paying for players that they traded away. And $2 million is chump change in the MLB world. That's nothing. That's basically 2 guys on vet minimum.
That's bread hand.
Yeah. and it allows us to sweeten the pot a little bit and potentially get a better prospect. And without that $2 million, I don't think we get Jake Madden, who was the top ranked prospect in this trade. Jake Madden was the number 8 organizational prospect in Los Angeles for the Angels. He's sitting, let's see where he's at right now in our list. They put him at number 20 coming over to our list. I like Jake Madden a lot. He was, yeah, Will Carpenter says the Mets sent $55 million to Texas. Like, it's insane how much money the Mets have paid. And I get it that Papa Cohen has the money to burn on that, but what a year it's been for the Mets. My goodness. I've been going through and I've been talking with some Angels fans of like talking about more major league ready or closer, like AA, AAA players that we could get. And the person I was talking to was like, no, I don't want to send anybody higher than high A. And I'm like, well, all right. What about Jake Madden? And Jake Madden ended up being part of this trade, which is really funny to me. The big thing about Madden is he's a big guy with a big fastball. He's 6'6" and has a 60 grade fastball that can regularly reach 98 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been a theme we've talked about before. Just the Rockies' approach to pitching now. They've kind of been slowly trying to stockpile guys that can throw a little bit of gas. They can fire that stinky cheese up in the zone and blow up past guys, which something they haven't done. They've been trying to replicate, reincarnate Aaron Cook for the past 10 years or something like that. And so it's been a lot of these guys are strike throwers. There's some good velocity on a lot of guys. Maybe they need to wrangle in some of that control so they stop walking as many. But there's a lot of promise and upside with guys like Jake Madden, who they're working with. Mason Albright was another one where he's having some issues here and there, and they've worked with him to adjust some mechanics. And the Angels worked with him to adjust some mechanics, and he's still zipping in there. Not as hard as Madden, but he's still nice and some nice delivery and some nice potential there. To be a solid starter, or guys that can fit in long relief, something like that. It's good to just see them, like we talked about in like weeks past. They're just not trying to cookie cutter everybody, but now trying to diversify that portfolio, which isn't that something about like business and stocks? Stonks?
Dick Monfort loves business.
Yeah.
He knows business. But Mason Albright, the other pitcher in the Grichuk Crone trade, is a lefty who was ranked number 28 in the Angels organization. He moves up to number 21 for us here in the Rockies organization. And, his fastball is not quite as good as Jake Madden's, but then he's got the other arsenal of pitch. He's got a 50 grade curveball, a 50 grade cutter, a 50 grade changeup, and he's got a little bit better command overall than Madden. Madden, on the other hand, then has a 50 grade slider. So they're two very different pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
That another interesting fact, have both already had Tommy John surgery. So ideally, they won't need it again.
Yeah, they're like that. My old 1986 Cadillac DeVille. That sure it had some miles on it, but also it was old, but it had a new engine that had just barely been put into it not that long ago. Ultimately, it was a pothole that killed my radiator, and that killed the car, but it wasn't the engine. So the arm may be fine. It might be something else, but we won't think about that.
Yeah, knock on wood.
Don't drive over potholes. But on the other hand here, Evan, just shifting it back to CJ Crone and Randall Grichuk, how cool it is for them to go back to the organizations that they were originally drafted by, and to see them immediately contribute there on Monday. Randall Grichuk made his Angels debut after 14 years. He finally made his Angels debut with the Angels. Hits a home run. CJ Crone had an RBI single. Really helped the Angels win that game on Monday. And so just really cool to see them immediately have an impact. It makes you feel good, like, yeah, they had value in some way, shape, or form. And hey, they get to chase down a playoff spot with Shohei Ohtani, the best player on the planet right now.
Yeah, it's watching. I was a little conflicted because it is sad to see him go. I both really liked Randall Grichuk and CJ Cron. But to watch them immediately make a difference with an Angels team that's hunting for the playoffs with Shohei Ohtani is really cool, because it's just not an opportunity that you're going to get here right now. This team is not a playoff chasing team. And that ties back into what I was mentioning earlier, is that you trade CJ and you trade Randall Grichuk because their contracts are expiring, because this season is already lost, that the extra wins that they could get us by staying on this team for however long it would be, for the rest of the season or whatever, really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, because this season isn't going to end in the playoffs for the Rockies, and everybody knows that.
Yeah. And I do find it hilarious that the Angels now have the trifecta. Ooh, there you go. The Angels drafted Grichuk and Trout with back-to-back picks in 2009.
Yeah, I believe
I forgot about that.
It was Grichuk like 24th overall, and then Trout 25th overall.
It's cool stuff. Very different career paths. But I do find it funny that the Angels now have the trifecta of former first baseman, corner infielders for the Rockies in Mike Moustakas, CJ Cron, and then they've got old Beer League Murphy hanging out in Salt Lake.
Yeah, so, and then Joel mentions Cron was drafted by the White Sox, but he also came up in the Angels organization. Played with Orem, he played with the Salt Lake Bees, and he made his big league debut with the Angels. So it's cool that he's back there as a key contributor. And I hope the Angels do make the playoffs. That'd be very cool, not only for the Angels and their fans, but for Moose and for Gritch and for CJ.
Yeah. Cron was in the first round in 2011 by the Angels at a University of Utah. So cool stuff. Good for them. And I'm sure they're excited to be back there. But anyways,
quick correction. He was drafted by the White Sox first, but did not sign, and then was drafted by the Angels.
Yeah. Fun stuff. And then we come to the day of the deadline here, Evan. August 1st. This is when the dust settled. They were not as busy as we maybe hoped they would, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first, going back with the Braves, old reliable, good old Rock, old reliable, predictable Bart, always chooses Rock, goes back to Brad Hand, send him over to the Braves for Alec Barger? We'll learn how to say these guys' names. But right-handed reliever, currently down in Double-A. He's enjoying a good season here in Double-A. It's kind of been rough here, but was like an outfielder also in college. But he's a reliever full-time now and enjoying one of his best seasons this year down in Double-A with Mississippi. And a nice solid pick. He's not a high-end prospect, dazzle us, but for Brad Hand and a lot of the bill that was going to come due with Brad Hand, with his option becoming a mutual option now with the Braves since he was traded. That's worth $7 million with a $500 buyout would be amazing. A $500K buyout. And the Braves must be footing that bill, so they'll eat that. Wasn't owed a lot this season because he was just on that $2 million contract overall, but a solid reliever who wasn't in their top 30 or anything, but a nice solid reliever for Brad Hand, who we got way more out of than we probably thought of in performance this season.
Definitely. And I think a big thing that hampered any sort of a Brad Hand trade was that mutual option for next year, because it's a hefty option. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of teams probably weren't willing to bite on that, or willing to part with a higher ranked or ranked at all prospect in order to make that trade. But the Braves are capable of footing the bill. They have the money for it. And Alex Barger is not at all a bad return. 25 years old, was drafted in the 17th round by the Braves out of North Carolina State. And like you said, having a decent overall year in Double-A with the Braves, with Double-A Mississippi ERA of 3.29 in 30 appearances. He's a reliever through and through. 38 and 1/3 innings, 21 walks to 48 strikeouts. So he could definitely get that walk rate down. But he's got a K through 9 in his last 3 seasons of 11 or higher. And this year currently sitting at 11.3. So he's got good strikeout stuff. And that's definitely something the Rockies have been hopefully intentionally focusing on, is a lot of the guys they're picking up have good strikeout potential. Of no more of this, oh, we're the Rockies, so we have to get sinker ballers and pitch low in the zone for ground ball contact. We need guys that can pound the zone and get strikeouts,
while also being able to get ground balls. Like, instead of just, like we said, the cookie cutter approach, where there's more ways to pitch than just trying to get a ground ball every time, because opposing teams pick up on that, and when they see the same kind of pitcher, that's when they kind of do really good hitting against you. So you get to see that, or he'll Double A, he might be big league ready. He's on that kind of older end. Some of these guys are around that 26, 27 range. They're just a step away from being in the big leagues, especially when you're getting guys in Double A, obviously Triple A. They can be immediate contributors, within 2024 or even 2025. I also agree. Just get the best pitchers possible there, Will. We do the best we can.
Definitely. I like the trade overall, and I'm, Brad Hand was one of the guys where, he needed to get moved on from. Like most of the other guys, and we'll talk about this later, is the majority of the guys that we traded are guys that were not going to be back next year, and they were brought in on low risk contracts and then moved for good returns. And Brad Hand continues to be a great answer for Immaculate Grid and has played for every organization in the National League East.
There we go. He's right behind old Dick Mountain himself, who's now with the Padres.
Which that's a strange trade. The Padres didn't do a lot this deadline, but they still made some moves that make you think they're going to try and make a final push to get to the postseason, but it's an uphill battle for them.
Yeah, we'll get into that maybe a little later here. But yeah, Brad Hand, Alec Barger, last one. We did a little interdivisional trade here with sending some cash over to the Dodgers for that left-handed pitcher. This is like right after Brad Hand. I was just finishing up the Brad Hand article when this news popped of Justin Brill from the Dodgers for some cash. Left-handed reliever, just in his 3rd big league season. He spent parts of the previous 2 years, debuted in 2021. Pretty cool story for him. He was an amateur free agent, signed with the Dodgers in 2017, debuted in 2021, and pretty solid lefty. Kind of fits into that Brent Suter type role. He's not high 80s, 88 or so, but he's got a good control of his pitch mix, good movement on everything. He's been tough on lefties, especially this season. And it was just a matter of, with the Dodgers organization, they acquired Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly, needed to make room on the roster, and so he gets DFA'd along with another guy. And so Rockies might as well dip into that Dodgers system and pull out a guy and see what you can get for him.
Exactly. And you can't let the fact that he was designated for assignment fool you into thinking that he is a bad pitcher, because granted, relatively small sample size. In his career, he's got 65 total appearances out of the bullpen, and 65 total appearances, 63 of which are out of the bullpen, and 2 starts, surprisingly, for about 66 and 2/3 total innings. Career ERA of 3.65, 43 strikeouts. That's really, really not bad at all. And this year as well, having a pretty overall solid season, 20 appearances out of the Dodgers bullpen for an ERA of 4.07, 19 strikeouts in 24 1/3 innings. Positive WAR out of the Dodgers bullpen. He really is just a casualty of the the Dodgers were adding some higher quality arms and they had to clear the roster space. And so the Rockies make that DFA waiver trade for him. And I think that's going to be a really solid move. We're probably going to see him in the near future. Relatively speaking, he is a big league level, soft tossing lefty reliever. He's not going to stay in AAA for super long. I assume that there's just some other stuff that needs to get sorted out in terms of how this roster is built right now. But he had a really solid minor league career as well. In his entire minor league career, ERA of 3.49.
Not too shabby.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and another lefty, which seems to be the Rockies' Achilles heel, is they just don't really have a lot of lefties readily available, especially reliever lefties. There's been like Lucas Gilbreth, but his arm had to get fixed. And then it was just Brad Hand and Brent Suter this year because Austin Gomber's our starter. So just a good depth piece, even just from the left side, another lefty reliever that you can pull up on sometime when you need him. And yeah, probably if September at the latest, early September.
Oh, for sure.
Rosters expand because he's already on the 40-man. So we shall see. But Evan, that kind of transitions us into that next topic thing of the moves the Rockies didn't make and who's still around when the dust settled. Still have Brent Suter, which, whatever. Harold Castro and Jurickson Profar. You can also throw in like Elias Diaz, Daniel Bard, but we figured those two were sticking around too, as well as Charlie Blackmon. But anything, I guess I can ask this question to you, is anything that surprised you with who didn't get traded?
Not really. I was sort of holding out hope that we would move really any of those guys, but I knew that they would all sort of be long shots. Brent Suter is here on not particularly a lot of money and has sort of bought into the Rockies system. He's one of those, he wants to be here guys. He likes being here. He likes pitching for the Rockies. And when the Rockies hear that, that means they try and keep them around. So I'm not surprised at all. My guess is that they're going to try and extend Suter at some point down the line and not let him, walk at the end of the season or anything like that. Not a surprise for me, though I was definitely holding out that maybe they would do it. Also not really surprising is that Jurickson Profar and Harold Castro were not moved. They don't represent a ton of value, but I was hoping that a team would take a flyer on them because I'm sorry, but post deadline there is, and we'll talk about this a little more in a little bit, there is no reason for either of them to be on this team anymore. They are just roadblocks for younger players. But that's where we're at. And then I knew Daniel Bard and Elias Diaz would not get moved, not in a million years.
Yeah, like the guys that had the most value are the guys the Rockies want to hold on to anyway, and so it was just sort of just trimming off the fat and everything. Which, yeah, it's better than nothing. That's the takeaways. This was better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like I said earlier, we traded 4 guys, which was more than I asked for.
Yeah. Definitely more action than we've seen in years at the trade deadline. And
if you count Moose, then we traded 5 guys.
Yeah. I count them. June and July, it all counts together. It all blends. But it's Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore.
50 First Dates?
No, the movie Blended.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's another rom-com of Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, and they go to Africa.
Oh.
Blended.
I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's a wonderful film.
It's okay.
That's high praise for recent Adam Sandler films.
It's about like every other Adam Sandler movie.
But what really is going to be important now is what the Rockies do with these guys that they didn't trade. Brendan Rodgers is back. there is officially no need for Harold Castro on this team.
Except that he's left-handed and he's our only other center fielder.
Except we have other guys who can do that in the minors.
No, they have to grow, Evan. They're not allowed to be on the big league roster yet.
And Jurickson Profar, I hate to say it, but just he's not really a good contributor on either side of the ball. Defensively, he is pretty bad.
He's sort of coasting at this point in the season. Because at the beginning of the year, we were like, he's playing some pretty good defense. He's making all these cool plays. It's pretty solid. But now we're just like, what is he doing out there?
It's looked like he's not really putting in a lot of effort when he's out there. Like he's not legging out the ground balls anymore. He's not really, really going after those plays in left field. And, by metrics, by DRS, he's one of the worst left fielders in the league. Mm-hmm. He's one of the worst fielders in the league by outs above average. He's just not been good. And we're at the point where I don't see a reason for him to still be here. And he's starting tonight's game. And I don't know why. because
he's getting paid too.
But at this point, the Rockies just need to eat the money. Mm-hmm. And, you designate him for assignment and you get those younger guys back in there, especially with guys like, Sean Bouchard is rehabbing in the Arizona Complex League and could be back at some point this season. You have outfielders in the minors like Cole Tucker and Jimmy Herron, who are both I think ready for a big league shot. Will mentions, oh look, the off the field things that we've heard about Profar showing up for like the sixth time is it's frustrating. And it's you look at, there was a reason why Profar hadn't been signed that late into spring training, and then we went and we overpaid for him.
Yeah, and there's like it's not like he's a huge waste of space. It's like he's contributed some stuff. He'll get his hits and stuff, but it's sort of like it's nothing mind blowing. We're like, yeah, we could just have Nolan Jones and Michael Tolley out there, something like that. We could have Cole Tucker up on the big league roster and giving him a shot to find himself a contract somewhere else after the season, type of thing. But what if? Here's a conspiracy theory of hope. What if he tanked his own value because he likes being in Colorado with Hensley Mullins, and now he's just going to pop off for the rest of the season?
I mean, if he pops off for the rest of the season, then great. But overall, it's fairly meaningless because he's not going to be here next year.
No, he's going to find his way to get back on the roster.
If
he's going to be like Hensley, don't let me leave. I've got nowhere else to go.
If Jurickson Profar is on the roster next year, we are in big trouble. And any and all praise that I have given Bill Schmidt this episode will go out the window.
No, he's a good clubhouse guy.
I'm sure he is.
He's a grinder.
So are a lot of other guys on this team. And a lot of guys. Cole Tucker is wildly popular down with his teammates down in Albuquerque.
Yes.
And
he probably has a personality.
And I think he's far more deserving right now of the playing time.
Please don't let him be our next Drew Butera. I agree.
Unless Austin Wins is our new Drew Butera.
You mean the guy who he looks like he always has the cry filter?
Yeah, he always looks so sad. Not as sad as who's that pitcher for the Astros who looks just comically sad?
I don't know.
I think his name's like Javier or something, Christian Javier. But if you look at his portrait on MLB, he looks like he had his heart broken.
Probably did.
Yeah, that is true. Favorite of the manager does only count for a little bit. Otherwise, Alexi Amarista would still be here because we know how much Buddy loved Little Ninja.
And where did he go after that? We don't know. Legend says you can still hear him playing baseball when the moon is out.
Where did he go after that?
Didn't he go overseas?
Let's find out.
He disappeared into the wilderness, never to be heard again.
Alexi Amarista. So 2017 with the Rockies was his last time playing big league ball.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here.
But overall, while you're looking that up, the hope is now it's kind of like what kind of happened with Jose Iglesias last year, where he just sort of like sees that playing time diminish more and more, partly whether it was an injury and they're just keeping him out longer because of that injury, or they see the playing time start to diminish because, we got to see these younger guys get more action, get their reps. Nolan Jones, Michael Tolia, Lars Montero. No, those three guys are going to be playing more, getting the bulk of things. And Charlie Blackmon's going to be back, we assume, if his hand hasn't fallen off. All those kinds of things. Some of those guys, there's some guys down in AAA that are knocking on the door that we want to get a look at. So his days may be numbered. It just depends. And if things kind of keep going south or if there's other problems that maybe arise, then Profar will might say goodbye to him. But we never know because it seems like at least the players in the dugout, it always seems like they like Profar. So who knows?
Yeah. So Alexi Amarista has played he signed a brief minor league deal with the Phillies in 2018 and played 51 games for the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. He's played a bunch of he's played a decent amount of ball in the Atlantic Independent League with the New Britain Bees and the Gastonia Honey Hunters. Mostly he has been playing in the Venezuelan League, with his main team being the Tigres de Aragua. And he played as recently as the 2022-2023 season with them, where he hit 297, 357, 411.
Mm-hmm.
And he did have a little bit of that sneaky pull pop with 4 home runs in 55 games.
Woohoo.
So good for the little ninja.
Having done every Rocky ever, it's alarming of how many guys just like randomly saw their careers end with the Rockies and just went on to do nothing anywhere else.
Oh, I think not a large part of it, but part of it is, we did used to have this reputation of we can be where hitters can go to revive their career.
There's a lot that didn't.
But yeah, there's a lot that didn't. Sometimes, I feel like there's tons of teams that are that. I sincerely doubt it's just a Rockies thing, but we get overexposed to it as Rockies fans, and especially with you doing every Rocky ever.
Mm-hmm. Fun stuff. New episode coming out. We'll do it on Thursday.
Yeah, this episode, for those who aren't listening live, if you're not listening live, this information is not helpful to you, but will be made available online tomorrow. But it really is. I'm frustrated that Profar is in the lineup tonight at all. I know that the Rockies weren't going to just immediately DFA him after not trading him. And we don't know if they even tried to trade him or if anyone was interested at all. But at some point, Profar's got to go.
Yeah, my prediction, he'd play out August. And then if things are getting even worse, and he's not contributing much, then yeah. Or it could be one of those things is September's getting closer, and we're not going anywhere. You can kind of DFA him, and then he can go see if he can sign on somewhere with a contender. Kind of like Jose Iglesias did a few years ago when he was out there with the Angels and stuff.
Yeah, and it's the same for Castro. Harold Castro is going to become more and more redundant with Brendan Rodgers back, like I mentioned, but also Coco Montes has been promoted to the active roster again, and Alan Trejo is still on the roster. There's only so many utility guys that you can have right now. And when one of them is 31, 32 years old, it should be an obvious choice who the odd man out is.
Yeah. But unfortunately, sometimes it's not that obvious for some of the decision makers. But, oh well. Overall, what would you grade this deadline?
I would give it a solid B.
Yeah, that's about
Could
where
have
I'm
done
at.
more, probably should have done more, but did way more than expected and did a good job with what they did.
Yeah, I'll give them that B minus B. Not too shabby. And it's like if none of these guys really pan out, hopefully you hit on at least one of them in some way. Even some of those higher ranked prospects, if you can hit on them.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you miss on most of them, you didn't give up that much to bring them in and take a flyer on these guys.
Yeah, you at least tried.
It's not like the Nolan Arenado trade or Troy Tulowitzki, where you look at the returns, or like Ubaldo Jimenez, that trade, and you look at the returns, you're like, what in the world did we get?
Nothing, basically.
Nothing. And that's the way the Arenado trade has kind of been pretty much overall, where you've like, we haven't gotten anything out of this.
Yeah.
So
minus Austin Gomber, who's been much improved recently.
Yeah.
But we need a full season of this from Austin Gomber versus a couple months of it.
We're like, yeah. And it's like none of these guys are like a Hall of Famer guy on a Hall of Fame track that you traded away and got a bunch of prospects back. The aged veterans, and you got a bunch of good little prospects that you can test out, experiment with, see if you can figure them out. If they contribute, that's great. But I'm not going to feel super bad if they don't pan out. It's like, well, we tried. As Bill Schmidt said, we tried.
We tried. Yeah. Skylar, who would you say your favorite guy that we got back in this would be?
No, I like that trade for Jake Madden and Mason Albright. Seems like a good little combo there. The guys they're starting and everything. I like some good starting pitching depth.
Yeah,
and that's what the Rockies need.
Good righty lefty 1-2 combo with
both
solid fastballs and a good variety of breaking stuff.
Yeah, it's like, would it be nice to have gotten in any of these trades like a guy that's in AAA, like on the cusp, ready to contribute in the roster or the starting rotation fairly soon? Yeah. But again, what we're working with probably wouldn't be able. It'd be tough to get that. And
for example, one of the guys on my list was right-handed pitcher Jack Kachanowicz, who's currently in AA right now. Mason Erla, right-handed pitcher with AAA. But because those guys are so close to big league ready, and the Angels are trying to push contention in order to keep Shohei Ohtani, I'm not surprised that the Angels didn't let them go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we got, and while it's going to take a little bit longer for them to get to us, I think we got a gosh darn solid consolation in two very good young pitchers from the Angels organization. I really like that move.
Yeah. In total, we traded 3 guys and got 3 pitching prospects. Not too shabby to the Angels. Angels and Braves are only trading friends.
Yeah, that's a little... That is weird that we made no moves with any other teams minus
minus paying the Dodgers so we could have one of their guys.
Which, I will also say I like that move a lot. I think Justin Brill can be a major league quality pitcher, and to pick him up basically as a cash payment waiver claim, that works just fine for me. You always need more pitching with this organization, and they got more pitching.
Someone wanted to ask here, Evan, before we close the thing out. We got about like 10 minutes or so. We can go as long as we want here when we're live. And this homies in the comments, you can sound off too, of what's been your the most surprising trade that you've seen up to this deadline around baseball in general. Because there's been a lot of crazy moves. We briefly touched on the Mets. Cardinals have been sellers. Padres and Angels are going for it. Marlins are doing stuff. D-backs and Giants are basically everybody in the NL West is going for it, except the Rockies.
which is the right move. Let me say that right now. The Rockies should not have tried to go for it. That would have been okay. The only thing that would have made me more mad than not doing anything is if inexplicably the Rockies tried to be buyers.
Mm-hmm. And we got one here. Ohtani staying with the Angels. For sure. Like everybody else, he seemed like surefire to get traded, but it's understandable why the Angels would hold on to him.
Yeah, that's super high on my list of surprises. Is that the Angels decided to be buyers and really go for a playoff push. And I think it's because of the fact that I know Artie Moreno said he did not want to be the owner that traded away one of the best players of all time. Was one of his motivations earlier in the year. But then the Angels went on a nice little win streak right before the deadline. And I think they had the realization of, we can get a couple things out of this. We can do a playoff push. We can make Shohei Ohtani happy, and then potentially be able to keep Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, that was a huge one for me too. And like, hey, if they can go for it, like they might as well try to prove it, and then in the hopes of try to re-sign him. Like, hey, look, we tried this season. We're all in. We want to try and win, and everything. And so good luck to them.
Yeah, definitely. Angels fans deserve it, especially after all the ups and downs that they've had.
Yeah.
Will says the Rangers getting Scherzer and a boatload of cash to cover him. I was curious if the Rangers were going to go for a big name pitcher. I wasn't expecting Scherzer, and I wasn't expecting the Mets to pay a ton. The big name in that trade for the Rangers in terms of prospect is second baseman shortstop Luis Angel Acuna, who is the younger brother of Acuna Jr. in with the Braves. And that's a bummer to lose him, but the Rangers organization has a really good second baseman and a really good shortstop signed long-term right now in Marcus Semien and Corey Seager. And they're fairly deep at middle infield in terms of prospects as well. So he is a guy that you could part with. And maybe they'll regret it later down the line, but the Rangers are showing that they are going all in.
Yeah, and good for them. I'm not going to be mad about a lot of teams that are on the fringe going for it. I just think it's better for baseball, and I always hate when one team immediately just retools their entire roster with 2 months to go. But the guys that can do it, and they get Scherzer and Lol Mets, who have blown all that money on those two big pitchers, and now they're both gone.
Poor fan base. Like, they thought things were going to be so much different with Cohen. And here they traded this year Tommy Pham, Justin Verlander, Mark Canha, David Robinson, Max Scherzer, and Eduardo Escobar. All good players. And
gone. Some other relievers and stuff just around the league. And poor Mets. But yeah, that Scherzer going to the Rangers. Good for the Rangers, who have a ton of pitching now. Though they got Jordan Montgomery, too, from the Cardinals. And so just bolstering that rotation where John Gray's looking around. He's like, I'm in some good company here.
And that's good coverage too, because Nathan Eovaldi, who's been having a great season hitting the IL, and now they just replenished that depth in spades. The Cubs becoming buyers, also definitely a surprise. They're another team that went on a nice little winning streak towards the deadline and decided to push in instead of trading guys like Cody Bellinger and Marcus Stroman. That was a big surprise, but I'm sure Cubs fans are definitely happy that they're trying to make a go of it, especially when that division, that NL Central, is totally up for grabs, with the Brewers being kind of meh, and the
Rangers or Reds have cooled off. Pirates are the Pirates.
The Cardinals are an absolute free fall.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into the whole drama with Nolan Arenado, a song and dance, as Rockies fans that we've gone through before, where all the rumors swirling. Is he? Oh, the Dodgers checked in, and he might be willing. He'd probably be willing to waive.
He said he'd waive his no trade clause for the Dodgers, and I was like, I've seen this movie before.
And he's expecting. He's expecting the. He's purely expecting himself to be traded. He's prepared for it. Oh, he realized the business. It needs to happen. And why we see that news, then the president comes out like, we're not trading Arenado. And we're like, is this when he says he feels disrespected and demands a trade? No, what is this, a live action Disney remake? I don't want this.
Yeah, we'll have to wait till the offseason and see what happens.
Yeah. But so I've got a buddy that's a Cardinals fan and asked him about it. He's like, I don't like the anxiety that comes with seeing every alert on my phone for trades.
Gee, but, wonder what that's like.
Yeah, it's awful. But he'll accomplish his journey eventually.
Yeah, we'll see. And then Eduardo Rodriguez rejecting a trade to go to the Dodgers, refusing to waive his no trade clause for there. We saw a variety of different reasons for why. One that I laughed at was that his wife is a Padres fan, so he refused. The other potential reason was that he wants to stay close to his family on the East Coast. Erod came up with the Red Sox organization, so that makes sense as well. But either way, he declined and chose to stay with the Dodgers, which is not the Dodgers, stay with the Tigers over going to the Dodgers and potentially chasing a ring this year, which is not a move that you see very often.
Yeah, to stick with the Tigers when you could have been traded. But good for him. Because there's I like that with Max Scherzer's wife was pretty active on Twitter, and people are that there's more humanity behind a lot of these moves too. These are people, they have their own reasons. Getting traded is tough for them, some of them, but then all the logistics of having to move and all that stuff can be really tough. Not only on the players, but they have their families as well. They have kids who've been settled there. They expect to be there long term for a couple years. Then all of a sudden, whoa, we're moving.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. A lot of time they don't have to say it. Is there anybody that you felt didn't do enough or could have done more at this deadline to help them in their playoff pushes?
The Yankees. The Yankees were one of the last teams to be involved in the deadline really at all. They really only made one trade that I can't even remember what it was right now because it wasn't a particularly interesting one.
I wonder what that's like.
And I know, right? And they're a team where they are below 500 in August for the first time since like 1992 or something like that. And they're in last and also in last place in the division for the first time in like 20 years as well.
Oh, it's
QMMT says good, but that's because he is a filthy Boston Red Sox fan.
Hey, the Yankees, they really don't deserve any like pity for them. Yeah, that's the shame.gif. Perfect. It's exactly how I feel like, oh, the poor Met or the poor Yankees. Like, this is the same song and dance we hear from the Yankees, and one little thing goes wrong, they're just losing their minds, collapsing because they're just not, don't know how to cope with failure or something. Whereas
it's like
Rockies we saw fans are dead inside to it.
It's like what we saw with Patriots fans when they, started not being as good after Tom Brady left. You have done nothing but win for so long that you don't know how to handle failure. Let this be a learning experience. Welcome to how the rest of the league feels most of the time.
I will say I wish the Orioles had been able to do more. They got Jack Flaherty, but
I think that's a great move for them. I do.
Mm-hmm. But it just feels like there's just still something missing that they could have done to just boost that. That's still ready is still a good roster, young, talented roster. And I can appreciate they're kind of sticking to their plan of how they've built up, and they're not going to immediately ship off their future for these short-term, rest of the season. But still feels like there could have been one guy you could have gotten to improve somewhere else as well. But
they
know what they're doing, though.
They were linked to Verlander for a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it works out for the Orioles. My guess is that they didn't want to part with some of their bigger prospects and risk completely blowing up a rebuild that they have been working on for a
Yeah.
very long time that is starting to bear fruit, especially guys like Keston Kjerstad and, even Jackson Holiday are big leaguers as soon as next year.
Yeah.
And that team is just going to keep getting better with their excellent farm system.
And with the way everything else is going there in the American League East, where it's kind of a two-pony race for that top division between them and Tampa Bay, which making all kinds of random moves. I'd really never pay attention to what the Rays are doing. I just look at the record and like, oh, they're still winning.
Okay.
And then the American, I was gonna say the American League Central, it's just like a black hole of stuff happening and everything. Like, I don't even know who's in the lead in that division anymore. Is it still the Twins?
Yes.
So that's the problem with that division, which I wish the Rockies could be in that division. There's like nothing ever happening there. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of baseball. Stuff happens, but
the current top spot is the Twins at 54 and 53, followed by the Guardians at 53 and 54. In the bottom of that division is the Royals at 32 and 75.
Yeah.
Which, oof. Do we think the Angels can make a playoff push with all these recent trades? Honestly, yes. I think they're not going to win the division. I think that's either going to be...
That's going to be from Texas.
Yeah, it's going to be Texas. The Rangers and the Astros are in a dead heat for the lead in the AL West. Mm-hmm. And unless both of them fall off, I don't think the Angels really have a chance to win that division. However, I do think they have a solid chance of getting in as a wild card.
Yes, currently in that wild card, Toronto has the third wild card spot. Then Boston's 2.5 behind them, and then the Angels are 3 games behind Toronto. So
and those are all teams to look out for. Boston really didn't do a whole lot at the deadline. They picked up Julio Urias. They picked up one of the Luis Urias from the Brewers. Yeah, Brewers. They didn't really do a whole lot else. They've got Trevor Story coming back very soon.
Yeah, and they traded away Kike Hernandez. So
yeah, they got rid of Kike Hernandez, which honestly works out for them because they didn't need him and he wasn't doing that good. And so they got value in return for him. And I don't know. It's going to be a really interesting American League wildcard race. It's going to be an interesting race in both leagues because now you've got the Cubs becoming buyers in the National League as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing with the Angels is it's just trying to figure out where they're at, even with their depth-wise, because they are promoting guys really quickly. Recent draft picks, first rounders are getting promoted quickly, even up into the big leagues. And then they've made these trades with these veterans. They've got Eduardo Escobar. They've got Moustakas, Crone, Grichuk now. Hopefully Mike Trout comes back sometime soon, eventually. So they're getting themselves primed up. They've had a lot of bad luck with injuries as well, but they've hung in there. And getting Lucas Giolito hopefully should be a boost for that rotation because they've got solid pitching. You've got a Wild Thing closing things out in the back end of the bullpen. So they're getting nice and well-rounded out, I think. It's just if they can show that, if they can last out and finish the race.
They've got to stay healthy, and they've got to keep winning important games.
Yeah, especially. Yeah. Also, surprising that Seattle was just kind of... Seattle's in that weird spot. They're only 3.5 back, but they've kind of turned into sellers. They turned into sellers and just kind of chopped off some pieces.
Yeah, they're another one where they're not a bad team. They're 4 games over 500 right now, but their playoff chances are a little risky because the rest of their division is so good.
Mm-hmm.
Minus the A's. And
what are you talking about? The A's are good.
Yeah, by how they crushed the Rockies in 2 games. But judging by their moves, they replenished their farm a little bit by trading Paul Sewald. Which is
AJ Pollock.
Bummer to see Sewald go because he was pretty popular with the Mariners as their as late relief in closing. Pollock never really caught on with the Mariners in terms of performance, so I'm not surprised they tried to move him in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. But only 2 more teams for AJ Pollock. He will be your 2026 or 2025 Colorado Rocky. He's getting there, Evan.
AJ Pollock, if you need an answer for Immaculate Grid, he's one of them. It's him and Brad Hand, guys who have just been with a ton of different teams. I don't know. I feel like that really does about it for trade talk. Rockies are in rain delay for tonight. Tyler Kinley has been activated off of the 60-day IL and will be available out of the bullpen tonight, which is awesome. We are so happy to hear it. Welcome back to Tyler Kinley.
The president is back.
Get that mustache growing.
Yeah. One last thing I was going to mention, Evan. The Cincinnati Reds didn't do much of anything.
They really didn't, but I think they've got a similar vibe going with the
Orioles.
Where the Orioles are much further along in that rebuild, and the Reds are overperforming. This is kind of like the Mariners last year. The Mariners definitely overperformed last year, and that doesn't mean that they were a bad team a worse team than they were. It's just that they did better than they were expected to because they've still got this young talent coming up and they're still working their way out of that rebuild. So I think the Reds did the right thing by not really mucking around.
Phillies, they got Michael Lorenzen. Not much else. The
Mariners would be in first place in the AL Central and tied for last in the AL East. Likely the weirdest I've seen the standings be, and that's saying something, says Joel.
Like I said, the AL Central is just this Bermuda Triangle of mediocrity.
You've got the Tigers who failed to get their way out of their rebuild and are now having to rebuild again. You've got the Guardians who are rebuilding, but they're not there yet. And they're like
a team that won't take those next steps up too, where they still are fairly working on a budget, and then they trade off. They just rely on that homegrown pitching, and then they trade off Savali, Josh Bell, Kyle Manzardo, who has a fantastic name. That's a good acquisition, though. My name is Manzardo. And then the Royals,
who are a train wreck, and the White Sox, who, if you heard the rant from that was on the radio a couple months ago, have just been so mediocre and just failing to deliver on rebuild after rebuild for the last few decades. And then you've got the Twins who, they've made the playoffs a bunch, but they just can't win in the playoffs.
Because they kept running into the Yankees.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a whole other conversation for another day of how baseball needs some realignment again. Figure something out, because as you said, the standings with the division winners, where you win the Central, you get to go to the playoffs. Oh, what's that? You lost a wild card, but still had a better record than anybody in that league? Well, you don't get to go. Weird. Oh, well. Someday.
It just means that we should add more wild card teams, right?
Everybody gets to go to the playoffs. Turn this into a Smash Bros roster. Everybody makes the playoffs.
Major League Baseball Ultimate.
Yes. We just sat here for an hour just quietly staring at each other now and see how long people sit here. But no, yeah, that's pretty much
get that engagement up.
Yeah. Follow me into the kitchen. I'll start making dinner. And it's nothing but a PB&J sandwich. No, I think that kind of covers it all, Evan. Overall, an interesting deadline. And like I said before, I prefer those deadlines where it's not a whole ton of wheeling. I like that there's more teams going for it, just because I think that's better for baseball in general, as opposed to where it's the same 3 teams that are buying everybody every year, where it's the Dodgers connected to every single big trade acquisition, and then they go and get them. And it's nice to see some of these teams that are just getting complementary pieces to the rosters they've already built that have got them to that point to be buyers.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, we managed to limp to this point, and then we're just going to swap out the entire roster for a bunch of big names, the best players in the league, and then shoot for the playoffs. And then, because we know the playoffs are a crapshoot, so might as well not mortgage your future for a roll of the dice in the playoffs. Like, yeah, definitely go get those big pieces. If you can't, go get a Max Scherzer or a Justin Verlander.
Yeah.
Especially if the Mets are paying. But I was happy with this deadline overall. It was not as surprising or wild and crazy as people probably thought it was because Shohei wasn't available. But overall, still pretty solid, sensible moves for a lot of people.
I agree. And like we said, the Rockies did what they needed to do. And that's really what matters here. Is could they have traded more people? Yes. Could they have done more? Of course. But they at least did something. Not even the bare minimum. Like they traded 4 guys this deadline, which was more than we could have expected.
They're that student who hasn't shown up to class all semester. They've turned in some assignments, but when it came down to finals week, they were there and they got that solid B on their final and passed the class with a D+.
Yeah, they made it. They made it to the midterm, and that's what matters. And then answer this question here. I think there will be an 8-team playoff at some point. I think that'll come after expansion, and there's going to need to be a lot of reworking for how the playoffs are done and aligned.
Yeah.
Because with expansion is also probably going to come some division realignment. In addition to also needing to figure out how things are going to be, seated and changed for baseball playoffs. Mm-hmm. It'll come eventually, but I don't think until after they figure that out.
National League North, South, East, West. American League North, South, East, West.
Question is, though, where would you put the Rockies?
Central. Whatever it is.
Just don't.
South. No.
Just get us out of the division with the Dodgers.
Yes. We'll swap with the Braves. The Braves could be in the
Braves can
NL West. We can go to the NL East.
To the NL West.
And we'll go to NL East.
The Braves have won the division more recently than the Rockies have. Which there's your fun fact for the day. If you didn't know it, the Atlanta Braves have won the National League West. The Colorado Rockies have not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're going to start wrapping it up here. Thank you all so much for joining us. Hopefully in the future we can do a lot more of these live shows, start getting some more people in here as well. Skylar has internet that works now, which is awesome.
Got that space internet.
Yeah, he's getting beamed up to space. And this is content that we love doing, like these kind of reactions and talking about it, where for our recorded shows, we try and do the same thing of trying to be like, it's very conversational versus trying to have it be scripted and just like, well, here are the points we want to hit on. So let's go for it and see where the conversation takes us. But then, these live things are also really fun because we get to interact with you guys as the viewers and listeners. And it's even more kind of light and breezy than what we normally do. So hopefully we'll have more of these in the future. In the meantime, though, Skylar, where can the folks find you at?
Oh, man, there's too many to name off nowadays. Main one's Twitter or X.
I'm not calling it
Extreme.
X. They got made to take the sign down. I'm not calling it X.
It's like the Kenny Rogers chicken sign in Seinfeld. They probably fried Elon Musk's brain. But you can find me over on... It's already been fried
long before that.
But you can find me over on Twitter or X for it's so stupid at @sideline_crowd. You can also find the Every Rocky Ever at Every Rocky Ever, just the way it sounds and it's spelled. You can We'll have a new podcast episode coming out this week. We have Patrick Lyons of DNVR Rockies on the show with us this week. It's a lot. We have a lot of fun. He shares a lot of good, just little fun facts about the guys he wanted to talk about, John Vanderwall and Brian Fuentes. And then find me on Threads at silent_crowd. And then over at Blue Sky, if you're on there, it's S Timmins, Timmins 13 at Blue Sky social, all that stuff.
.bsky.social.
They got to shorten that up somehow.
They really do. We talked about this a little bit at the end of the show for yesterday, but all these like centralized social media things, Mastodon and Blue Sky, they really need to figure out just like a simple username system, because having to add that part at the end is ridiculous.
Stupid.
It is stupid.
Like I'm 13 years old playing Halo on the Xbox. I'm
XX Godslayer 3269420XX.
But what about you, Evan? Where can the folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter and at Threads at Evan_Lang27 and on Blue Sky at EvanLang27.bsky.social. You can also find us, Rocky Mountain Rooftop, on Twitter. That's at Rocky Mountain Rooftop, at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. Always love to hear from you. Both of us are always writing and posting stuff on Purple Row as well. At Purple Row on Twitter, www.purplerow.com. Also starting to post more material on the Fans First Sports Network website, which is ffsn.app. All podcasts get posted there as well. And we're working on getting some more written content up there as well, as that site is sort of working its way out the gate in terms of being a thing. If you ever have any questions that you want to be answered on a podcast or in a mailbag segment, you are welcome to leave them as a comment on the podcast postings for Purple Row, or shoot us a message at the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Twitter, and we will do our best to get it in the show.
Yeah, and thank you all for tuning in with us and listening to our shenanigans, interacting with us. We really appreciate it. You don't know how much we appreciate those that are loyal listeners and supporting us in our little shenanigans here.
You guys just listened to us talk for an hour and 17 minutes and counting. I can't even get my family to do that.
Oh, goodness. They either hate themselves or they really like listening to Rockies baseball. But
I mean, could be a little of both if you're a Rockies fan.
Probably.
I went to 2 Rockies games this weekend against the Oakland Athletics. One in which we got absolutely curb stomped, and one in which we won 2-0. So
that's baseball.
And I'm pretty sure I got food poisoning from a fancy ham sandwich.
That's the parting message here about this trade deadline. Never trust a fancy ham sandwich. All right, let's close this out.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful night.
Farewell. X.
We're going to get banned for throwing up gang signs.
Oh, I haven't even started yet.